so this is our second prep course for system analysis and design. So what we want to do, last time we did the use case diagram from the National Collegiate Conference problem statement from the spring. So now we want to review the use case description and the sequence diagram. That's hard. So all of you got a handout, and this is based off of the paragraph that's on it is based off of the National Collegiate Conference problem statement from last year. So what we did to make it easier, instead of doing a bunch of use case descriptions, we decided let's just choose one and kind of go over what you need in your use case description. And remember, we told you that it would probably be a good idea to make a template before you go to regionals. And so really we created the template for you here.
Thank you.
And yeah, so this is just really a fill in the blank type exercise. And so what we want to do is you can go ahead and read this little section, and this is based off of the second use case right here for create project profile. And this is basically what's needed for that to happen. So that's what we're going to do our use case description off of. So if you want to go ahead and you can read it and identify the components for the use case description. So have you done a use case description before? Have you taken this class before?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Has everybody taken this class before? Yeah? Kind of.
Hey,
Okay.
Read it now.
So,
Hey, do you have
yeah, so do that, and then
your
we
ID
can
card?
review the
Section.
actual solution from the winning one.
Now, is this paragraph something they give us, or we make it up?
No, so this is something that they give us. So there's,
It's like a packet.
Is it underlined like that?
Yep.
yeah. So here's the packet that was given. And then that paragraph is coming from, oh, so it's not on the first page. It's one of these pages.
I think it's the 9.
Uh-huh.
9.
So it's page 9, and it's figure 5, the activity of, so creating the project profile. So, yeah, that's what I printed off for y'all. So again, it's all like segmented into what you need. So this is for the use case description. There's another section for the class diagram, all the other sections too.
Who did you do this with last year?
Oh wait, I think I have this visual here. But we can put it up there in there.
She's still here?
so do y'all wanna start talking about it? Okay. So the scenario is like, what's going on? It's not, what's going on with the interaction between the system and the person, but it's just kind of that general idea. So obviously the use case name is create project profile, as it was named up there, but the scenario, what they put was project director has started the process of creating a project, so the system needs to create a corresponding project profile. So if you remember from the first part course we had from the beginning, it said that once you created a project, the project director created a project, they also had to create a project profile to begin the process. So that's why on the use case diagram that I had drawn, it said create project and then includes create project profile. So the triggering event for this, the triggering event is like, what is triggering this event to happen? So why do you need to create a project profile? So a new project begins to be created by the project director. So basically the project director needs to create a project profile. That's the triggering event for this, this part of the system. So the brief description is like, what's supposed to happen between the system and the actor. And that would be the project director begins the process of creating a new project and inputs the information in the system, so the system records that information, which creates the project profile. Does that make sense? The actors, the project director, that's within this paragraph. Related use case, create project. So on the use case diagram itself, remember how it was included, that there was a create project and then includes create project profile? So that means that for related use cases, it's included with the create project, so it's a related use case. Does that make sense? So,
And is that only going to be like stuff that's like with the bubbles that are like connected?
I think so. Yeah, I'm pretty sure. Because none of the rest of them are like that. So stakeholders, most of the time that's not really stated in the problem statement. It's kind of like an assumption. But for this one, I think maybe later in the packet it mentions management. But usually, I guess you assume stakeholders are management or something like that. But you'll get the gist of it from your packet. But stakeholders are the people who, I guess, benefit from it, benefit from the system. The preconditions, so these are the things that have to happen in order for this event to happen. So project information is put into the system. So that means since the project director was going to create the project, then the project information has to be put into the system in order for this to happen. Post conditions, this is what is supposed to be the outcome of this situation, of this use case. And the outcome is that the project profile is created to finish the process of creating the project. Right? The flow of events, this part is pretty straightforward based on what's in the paragraph. And it's just the interaction between the actor and the system. So if you want to scroll down a little bit. So they did theirs, I think, I don't know, I'm used to seeing it in a different way. Like where it's, actor does one thing, system responds, so it's 1 and then 1.1. And then actor is 2, 2.1, 2.2, 3. So I think they did it a little different than
I think the
what we
reason why
implied.
they did that though is because it states in that paragraph that that the system initiates.
Yeah.
Like you'll see when I go through the sequence diagram, there's like a couple ways you could have done it because it could have referred back to the one before the create project, because you have to create the project, so it sort of prompts you to do
I
this.
see, okay. So, all of those things are outlined in this little paragraph with the interaction between the actor and the system. So the system does this, therefore the actor does this, the system does this, the actor responds, and so forth. I didn't notice any exception conditions. I think that they thought there might be an exception, and then they didn't finish this part of their solution. But they must have thought it went in number 2. So in the exception conditions, if there are exceptions, you do need to relate it back to the number. So let's say that there was, a 1 on the actor side and the actor did something, and it went over to system. And let's say there was an alternate way to do it, then that exception condition needs to be for 1, so that they can tell which exception you're talking about, like which part of the flow of activities you're talking about.
Couldn't the exception condition have been, it tells you that if,
Yeah, I think I know where you're
four
going.
hundred, because it tells
Yes.
you, it's like, okay, for more than
Yes.
400, but if it's
Right.
less than 400.
I was thinking that too. I was thinking that those could definitely be exception conditions because they're like an alternate flow.
Yes.
I think that they should have gone in exception conditions. Do you agree?
Yeah, I'm gonna really get into that, because like,
Yeah.
these are the basis of all of your other diagrams, so you really wanna make sure that you have
Right.
this set, because you're gonna have to make it for each one of your use cases. So like, we were thinking that we would go through and read it all together, like read the problem statements together, go through and make our overall use case diagram, and then go through and make each one of these, and then move on to our other diagrams, because if you, I guess last semester when we had to do our project, what happened is we split all of our diagrams up, and then none of them matched up at the end.
Exactly.
So this is like
Yeah.
what we thought as our basis for our contest. If we can do each one of these together, then
Then
when
we'll
we
understand
separate on the
together.
sequence diagrams and we separate on the class,
We're on the same
class
page.
diagrams, that we're still on that same page and they will connect.
Yeah.
So we wanna make
So-
sure that we have these descriptions really well thought out.
Right. So yeah, another tip: do your use case diagram together. Do this together as well for each of the use cases. So, but yeah, I agree. When I first looked at this, I thought those were alternates and they should be in the exception conditions. So,
But I think they just ran out of time.
I think they do too.
Well,
Yeah.
and I think that the winning one is just usually the best, it's not.
Yeah, this isn't the holy grail, like this is how it's supposed to be made, but this was the best they found, so.
And also, I think there's a lot of more information so that that little missing thing doesn't really detract from the winning.
Right.
Yeah.
Because they have so much more information filled out
Yeah, exactly.
overall.
Yeah, and it's always up for, what's the word, interpretation, yeah, that's what I'm looking for, so. Do y'all have questions on the use case description or any of its components?
Yes, can you go back over the, one prior to that, and just briefly go back over, okay, it's like the scenario,
The
it's
use
what's
case
going
or
on.
the-
No, just
That part?
yeah. It's like, okay, with the scenario, it's what's going on, the
Mhm.
trigger event, how would you explain that?
Trigger event is what happened that triggered this event. So like, why are we doing this? Why is this happening? The new project begins to be created by the project director. So this event is happening because the project director has to create the project profile.
Has to.
For the project.
It's because he created a project.
Sorry, say that again?
It-
Because he
like I
created
said, the
project?
Project director creates a project. Is that the
Yeah.
another way to say
So,
it?
yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think so. I think they could have written it differently, but what they're trying to say is the triggering event is that a new project has been made. Therefore, a project profile has to be created.
And I think this is all in chapter 5 of the
Yes,
book,
thank
so
you.
in case you guys want
Okay.
To
some
review
more
use case
detail.
descriptions are in chapter
Yeah, I just figured just to have those questions,
Yeah.
it's like, what are you answering?
Yeah.
What's the question that you're answering?
Yeah.
And so with the precondition, what was the question?
Precondition is what has to happen in order for the sunny days to happen. So what has to exist or what has to be happening before this happens. So for them, they put project information is put into the system. So that's saying that in order for this to occur, the preconditions that have to be met are that the project information is put into the system. So not like the creation of the project and the information for that project. And then below that, you've got your create project profile. So preconditions is that. Post-condition, again, is what is the result of this event? What's supposed to happen after the flow of events? So the project profile is created and blah, blah, blah. That's the post-condition. But yeah, chapter 5.
Yeah.
Anything else? Those were good. Any other questions?
Do you guys feel like you have enough info to really get like the foundation of the use case diagram and the use case descriptions?
So I definitely suggest really going through and looking at the problem statement from last year and then identifying where these things are. It's a little daunting because there's a lot of information here. But again, like I said, I found this on page 9. And so there are different sections. So if you look through this, you can see, oh, okay, so when it says, the behavioral model, that's when I need to be making this kind of diagram or whatever. So there's different categories for things. So if you thumb through it, then you'll be able to find your way. I think that's something you should do.
Did you have a question?
Is the scenario usually pretty similar to the brief description?
Yeah, I think it is, and it's not as specific. And so the difference between them.
I would say the scenario also has sort of the precondition into it.
Mhm.
So like what happened right before we're creating this use case, you know what I'm saying? If there's any sort of like thing that we had to do before, and then an overall description of it, where the brief description is a little more detailed.
Yeah, so it sounds like you're right, like the precondition meets the postcondition. Because so therefore the system needs to create the project profile. But the brief description is what he's actually doing. So the project director begins the process of doing this, and the system records that information to create the project profile. So it's like a little more specific as to what's going on. Does that help?
Mm-hmm. And then you said the stakeholders, you think they put management because of like some other stuff in the
I
text?
think there's more in the problem statement about it.
Yeah, and I would say that goes back to like the business process.
Yeah.
And going through the whole thing and
Thinking
seeing
about who your stakeholders would be. I think it could probably be up for interpretation too, who your stakeholders would be. But I think typically, even in class, I think we talked about it was like managers, management, something like that usually. It depends on the student. Anything else?
Okay, so now on to sequence diagram. You can call that system sequence diagram because I think before this we did not really have a good interpretation of the difference between system sequence diagram and sequence diagram. So system sequence diagram, or SSD, is going to be basically the interaction and messages sent between all the use cases that we went through. So it's just a general overview of the system. And then the sequence diagram, which we're going to go through really, well, I don't know how detailed, we'll try and get there. But it's going to illustrate the objects that participate in that use case. So the objects typically that we're going to go through, let me see. Okay, so this is not mine. I found this on the internet. So we're going to have an actor, the object, a lifeline, which is just, you'll see in a little
putting
bit.
between the actor and the system, right?
Exactly. A focus of control, which is where that goes on the lifeline to show you exactly where and when those messages are being sent. A message, and then if there is an object deconstruction. So this is what a sequence diagram, and like I said, whoever made this PowerPoint, kudos to them, they really did a great job getting everything together. So your messages are gonna go in vertical, you see the y-axis there, it's for time, so in the order that they are portrayed in the problem statement. Then we've got the objects at the top there, so it's gonna start with the left and move over to the right depending on when those objects are created. And the messages you can see on there. Lovely. And when they're activated, which is where those focus of controls are started. So, and we can put this up. We can put this out there. So it's super detailed. Yeah, but it definitely goes through everything that you need to. So
I feel like in class we didn't really go through sequence diagram all that much. So
no,
this
and
is a good thing to review.
chapter 5 is going to have the system sequence diagram, and then the chapter 11 is going to have, they call it the first cut sequence diagram, and so that's what we're going to do. So I think through class, what we did is just basically do a system sequence diagram and then add what they call the controller in on the end, which controls the flow. And if any of you are taking the iOS app class right now, we talked a lot about pointers. I don't know if you guys have heard that in your other classes, because this is the first time I've been hearing it. But Dr. really talks a lot about pointers, and the pointer is basically where the memory is stored in the system or in the program. And so the controller is going to receive the location of all that information. And then if you can sort of think about it, that for this new object that gets created, the controller is controlling the flow of that information. So you want to make sure that you have here you have your actor. Then you have the dialogue, which would be, in our case, it's going to be the system's user view. So that's what that is. And then it goes on to the controller, which in the book it says that it's to catch incoming messages and distribute them to the correct internal domain objects, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. So does that make sense to everybody, or is it kind of,
if I see it,
I might not be
it'll
making
make more
sense at
sense.
all? No?
It'll make more sense probably when I remember it.
Yeah. So there's just a lot of, I put in that paper that I gave y'all, all of the syntax stuff, I guess, the symbols that they use in visual paradigms, so we'll go through some of those.
Now, visual paradigm pretty much makes this for you, right?
Yes,
Are
but
you
you
gonna
have to
show
know,
us how?
yeah,
Okay.
you have to know where to find and what thing you actually want to use. That's why I put this in there. But the steps for building the sequence diagram that we're going to go through, set the context. So we want to make sure that we find which use case we want to use, which they sort of lay that out for you in the problem statement. You want to figure out all of the objects and the actors that are going to participate. So some of those, which we talked about in there, so the actors would be the project director who interacts with it, and then obviously the user interface, again the controller, and I'm just sort of the way these are laid out through the program, and you'll see that when we go into visual paradigm. I'm trying to think what else. So I have a picture of it, we'll get to that. Identify the objects and the actors that we're going to use. We're going to set the lifeline, so that's just that line that goes down. Yep. Lay out the message, so we're pretty much just going to go through the paragraph and you'll see the messages that are there. We're going to add the focus of the control for each object. So that's just like I said, the the square that goes over the dotted line, and then we're gonna validate the sequence diagram. So these go a little more into what we need to do with everything, but let me
Oh, wait.
pull up.
Go down one slide. Is this? No, never mind. Go ahead.
These are like setting the controls, yeah. So like those boxes that you can see, Visual Paradigm doesn't really separate it very well. So they're just gonna have boxes over the entire part that when you're using that part of the program. And so there's a couple different ways that you can write the messages, but what we're gonna do is the simplest form where it's a solid line going to the object, and then it's going to be a dotted line coming back. So with whatever information is received back to either the system or the
So sending the information to the system is solid, and the system back to the actor is the dotted.
or it could be back to the system,
Yeah.
which we'll go through.
Okay.
Okay, so if you guys do have laptops or you can follow along, hopefully. We're going to use UML modeling and the sequence diagram here. Our finished product is going to look something like this, which I spent a really, really, really long time on yesterday. So hopefully we can come up with that. So on here, up at the top on Visual Paradigm, every diagram that you make, it's going to start with, like SD would be sequence diagram. If you make a use case in here, it's going to say use case and then the diagram name. So we're just going to name this create project profile. Does anybody have questions right now?
So you just click UML modeling and then you're
Mhm.
there.
Okay, so the thing with Visual Paradigm, I'm going to get rid of. When you click on something in here and you do not press the, sorry guys, it's very finicky. You don't press on the mouse button, then it just keeps creating whatever object you double clicked on. So always click back on this mouse button. So we're gonna start right now with an actor. And who's the actor that we,
The project director.
yep. Oh my goodness.
So try to practice
Yeah.
before you go to the competition. Just try making this on your own. Of course, the solution is in here. I think her solution's a little different than we could send it to you.
Yeah. Mine's super detailed because I went through this for a long time. So, and then we're going to make the first lifeline, which is, it's just you can call it system, or I think I'd put view. So this is like the user interface.
Okay, so the first lifeline is your user interface.
Yeah.
And you can call it view.
View, or we can do like profile system.
Okay.
There's also another link that I found that is from IBM, and they have really good like formatting, which tells you exactly how you want to write it. And with this, the colon that I'm writing in here, it's for like different classes. So like our different classes that we come up with in our class diagram, this is what you're going to be putting here. So, or that's how you would type it, is the colon and then like the class name or the object name. Okay. So, and then we have the controller, which is going to control our flow, and then we'll get started.
Okay. So the typical syntax for writing that is this, this,
Mm-hmm.
this.
And then writing like profile controller.
Controller.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So it's this one.
You know I'm the worst typer.
Yeah, that's okay. So everybody understands why we have profile system and profile controller so far?
You have to add both of those.
Yes.
So the system is what the actor is interacting with to make things happen. The controller is what's controlling the interaction. The controller is always there?
Yep.
Always there.
But can't you just write controller, you have to write profile controller?
It's like, I'm trying to remember what it's called. So it's the instance of the class. So you write the instance name. So like if we just, I'm writing controller in there so you guys know what it is. And then profile controller is what we would write as a class in our class diagram.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So we obviously need like a user interface for our profile system, so that would be in our class of profile system. So I'm just writing view instead of like user interface, which is how they wrote it in theirs.
Okay.
So you're gonna take your actor, and then this is whatever information they're sending to the profile system. One thing that you can do is have it refer to something else. So I put this on ours because it's going to be referring to the project profile.
Okay.
So up here, this is how. And this is like referring to the project profile sequence diagram that they're using before. And you can link all of these together, like when you start a new one, that's how it's gonna refer back to that project profile, or create project is what I meant. Create project.
Okay.
So you remember how it said to, I'm pulling this up. So like here, I had it refer to create project at the top there.
Because that was the related use case in the
Yes.
use case description.
And because of that use case, it said the first sentence, system prompts project director to enter details related to the number and assigned weight of input, output, tables, files. So I didn't want to just write a line because that's not really what we had. We had the 1.1 on the system side, remember? So that's why I said refer, create project. You guys can do it a different way if you want to have it going back to the actor, but the actor has to put in the project details. So
Okay.
on here, so do you see I just touched over the that line there and it made this little icon. So this is the message that we want to send over to the profile system. And we just want it to say enter project details.
Okay, so.
Yep.
But doesn't the system prompt the director? So is that the first message?
That's what I was saying. Yeah,
That's what
the
that part
refer.
is?
Yeah, because if I
I guess
said
I don't understand.
view, and then I could do like a dotted line back arrow, but this is just saying like straight out enter project detail. Like the view has to give it this view to enter that information.
Okay.
So there's a lot of details that it has to send through. I'm just gonna copy that because it's gonna have to send through to the next one as well. And so really it's just finding what things you want it to set up. So like just knowing what these icons mean, which is what I put on the paper on here. That's what a lot of those icons are for. So it's gonna enter the project, inputs, outputs, and what I did is write a note. So on here, this little dotted line, it's an anchor note, and that's where I would write all of the all the things that I mean by project details. So this can refer back to the class diagram if you want it to. I read, but I was just taking all of the,
What's in here, so the
Exactly.
assigned weight and inputs, outputs, all that
and you wanna make sure that you're using the same terms from your class diagram so that nobody gets mixed up. So that's again why it's important to make sure that you guys are communicating as a team when you're doing this. So I'm just gonna put on here like inputs, outputs,
and the rest.
yeah. And then I can move this stuff to make it look a little better.
So, okay.
Then, I'm not gonna move this out. So you see I added the project details, and now the next part of it is to compute the TAFP. So this is a little bit different. It's not gonna be this kind of message, it's gonna do what's called a self message. Because it's just going to compute it itself and
Yeah,
then
so-
make a decision from
So
there.
it says, once this data has been entered, the automated system will compute a TAFP amount. So like she said, the system's doing it itself.
And so I'm putting those parentheses because that is for, does anybody know what that's called? Off the top of their head? What are the arguments? It's like the arguments that you need in order to make that method happen. You guys remember in like VB1 when we, for
Parameters?
VB2?
Parameters.
Parameters, thank you. Sorry, I've read a lot of things today. So, you would put in, y'all see how that happened.
Yeah. You didn't even take your own advice.
I think I did, I don't know why I made a note. Or what it did. So if you do make something, this is actually good. All you have to do is make sure that it's highlighted and then just delete it. It's gonna ask you this twice. Just choose yes. So the next part that we wanna do is make another message. And this I did as a recursive message. So what I'm gonna do is end up putting a frame over this because it's going to be, remember if it computes less than 400, it's gonna be one thing. And if it computes more than 400, you're gonna do a different process.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's, we're gonna do an alternate box over the whole thing so that we can separate those two processes out.
Okay.
So in order to sort of illustrate this a little better, I just did, it's called a recursive message. There's also a re-entrant message and you don't want to click on that. The recursive message, all it does is just make that extra little box below. Do you see that? How the first one that we did just went back on itself and then the second one made that little box. So here's where I just pulled out and made all of these littler, so like the determine the lines of code, determine person months, determine number of persons, and determine number of months, and then project cost. So I just separated all of those out so that you could see exactly what formulas it was doing. And then do you see this right here, the alt? So you can make a loop or an alt. And that is located on this side thing here.
So is the greater than 400 within the alt box, you said? Correct.
Yes. Yes. So we want to do so here, alt combined fragment, and then there's also the loop combined fragment. The alt is for like an if-then statement. So if we have 400, then we do this, or else we do this. But a loop would just
Like
keep
this recurs
continue it.
until it stops.
There's also an optional, so OPT, which I put on there. We're just gonna kind of go through this and then. So you just drag it. Oh, there's my itty bitty box. Well, and this is on my computer, so this is making it extra.
There we go. Okay.
So I would pull the 3 stuff and make sure that I could get it into a box here. And then with this, you can just make it bigger or smaller, and I kept having to add things, so I would make it bigger. In order to like put the parameters of what our alternative stuff was, you just click on that little Alt button in the corner, and then it's gonna automatically put it in brackets, which is your argument. So it was
Is it
less than 400? Okay, so TAFP less than 400.
Okay, and then what happens during that?
Exactly, and then this dotted line, and
Separates it?
yep, the dotted line is basically like your alternative or else, which you can probably figure out how to write else in there. Do we have any questions so far? Yeah.
I keep getting it to do the 111 thing in the same way.
The what?
Like it, when I do the compute task,
TAFP?
Did you-
transforms it to 111.
You mean the numbering?
Yeah.
Okay, the numbering, which I wanted to take out because it doesn't completely follow our use case description.
Oh.
So you would go into here and do, I think it's numbering. Yep, see, I can't completely work this thing. But it's like a type of numbering. So you would just want to take it out completely, or you can do like the sequence number, you can just delete that.
So
Because you would want
don't
this to
that.
match what your description
What did you
is.
say that loop was called, that top one?
This,
No, not
a self message,
the compute, TA.
a self message, self message.
Yeah, because the
Message to
system's doing
itself.
it within itself.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what those tiny boxes are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Whenever you create a new object, you want to make sure that you do create message and then new lifeline. So you don't want to create all of your objects up at the top. If a new lifeline is supposed to create it, that's where you want to create it because it's going to go a little bit lower. So I made a picture. I made the object like a specific project profile. So that's why I did A and then project profile as its own object there. So it created the project profile because it was less than 400.
Mhm.
And then it set the projected cost, and then it pushed back to the actor, which is that dotted line, remember? And that the information that it pushed back again was the parameter, the message project profile. So, and then once the project profile was created, and this is where the one online did not do this, but it said that the project manager has to assign the tasks.
So it says if, record the computed cost to the project profile, display profile information with project cost, and prompt the director to assign tasks to the project. So that's where that message is going back and coming back.
And then let me do one of the like push back so we'll just do so this is where it created something, and then we want to do a message lifeline, and we're going to do this back to the project director, and this is where I'm just going to say it's giving back the whole project profile.
Because it says display profile information.
But do you see how it's a solid line right now?
No.
And we want it to be a dotted line. So we've got to highlight over that, and then go to this little button here which says message type. And then we need to change the type to return. a lot of detail work, but it makes it for you, which is a lot easier than Visio. It's
'Cause it's
just
just-
knowing which icon to push on what.
Yeah.
Okay, and then so say it said that we wanted to delete the project profile, we would need to put like an X at the bottom. It doesn't say to do that, but you just want to make sure, and I honestly have not done that. So I will have to find the deletion stuff. And all of this is in the slideshow, and it'll tell you kind of what message type is what. So what I had to do is once it said to assign the tasks, I just put to reference the project task
Why?
sequence diagram, because that's the next one that we're supposed
The
to
next use
make.
case?
Yeah, exactly. So,
Okay.
and then this is the else, remember the dotted line?
Yeah.
So if it's not 400, we
So does that
wanted
need to be over here on the left side? Does it need to say TUFP?
No, because that's sort of implied.
Oh, implied that it's else.
Yeah, when it's an alternative box, when it's an alt box, it's implied that, but
Okay.
you can add that as well. You can just write, it just needs to be in brackets else. And then, so if it's not 400, it's going to create that CIO system. So it's gonna
Right.
it's gonna prompt the CIO to complete a request to the vice president. And so, I put the get additional funding message there. And then remember I said that there's also an optional box, and it should not have this dotted line. I don't know why mine would not stop doing that. But it says that it may entail the CIO to break this project into separate projects for funding. So when it said may, that's why I put that it was optional. So separate the projects, and then that goes back to my controller. And then, so if it's not the CIO, I just had it send a message back to the actor so that the actor could know when that part of the project was done.
Yeah.
So, does anybody have anything that they would add to that, or any other?
The loops. Talk about the loop.
The loop is just, it would say loop up here. It's gonna be the same thing as the alternative.
Oh, okay.
But that it loops around, and then in those brackets, instead of saying the condition, it would say for all projects. Like say somebody added
through the same
multiple
process.
projects, yeah, or for, if you're adding items to a cart, it would need to add, for every item, you would need these certain conditions, then you could do a loop for that. Okay, but just, I guess, finishing up this, seeing if there was anything else that we needed to go over. But yeah, I would really, really look at this,
This is
PowerPoint.
Kind of the most intimidating part in my mind is the sequence diagram.
Yeah, just because it's really detailed, and
Yeah.
you just really have to think about all the class objects that you're referring to, and when it's created, in order to make sure that you have the flow. And what it said is, if you look at the preconditions of your of your use case description, if there's stuff in the preconditions and the postconditions, then you don't have to worry about those objects being created, but everything else should be in your sequence diagram. So if you don't have it in there, then you need to make sure that it's in your precondition and your postconditions. And I have a lot more information if you'll have questions about stuff, but I think that y'all's brains, I did this for 7 hours and my brain feels like it's going to explode, so. And then IBM, I Googled some stuff, and IBM had a really good just notation for how to write all this stuff. So and yeah, I have 1,000 links. So this website was really good, UML Basics, and so it goes through and it says the the notation here for the sequence diagram title. You want to make sure that it has the diagram type, which is SD, and then the diagram name, and for all the different messages, what's required, but I thought that this was good to make sure that you have everything like really uniform and not just the different tests or so. Questions?
So we're gonna have to make multiple
So,
of
okay,
everything?
here's how it works. So if you look at the problem statement, on the back of it, on the very back page, it tells you, oh, I didn't give it to you, sorry. But it's online
if I
and
have
I
it.
will give it to y'all again. So at the bottom of it is the evaluations. So this is what they're grading you on. So it tells you that you need your use case diagram, the descriptions, the activity, blah, 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 blah. But yes, for each use case that's in your use case diagram, which is the little actor that I made up there and everything, yes, there needs to be a description for each use case. And then for each use case description, there needs to be a sequence diagram. So we talked to the professors, asked them, you know, is there a clear difference between doing an activity diagram and a sequence diagram? Because in the deliverables, you can choose. It says you can choose. You can either do the activity diagram or the sequence diagram. So the sequence diagram is obviously a lot more sophisticated than the activity diagram, even though the activity flow diagram is much easier. But their consensus was that it looks more business professional, and that's probably why the winning team chose to do that instead.
And Lee told me that that's what the judges prefer.
Yes. So we want to do the sequence diagram, not the activity flow diagram. But yeah, so for each of these, there needs to be a sequence diagram for each of the use cases.
So, and how we like broke this up was so that we would teach the activity diagram on the last day, so that in case we wanted to go back, say you guys didn't want to go over the activity diagram and we wanted to go back over some of the stuff that we had a little more trouble on with the last sessions, that we could throw that out because you wouldn't use it. You know what I'm saying? Like if you were going to use the sequence diagram, that we could go over that more than just for today. So if we want to go over that again, we don't have to go over the activity diagram because it's either or.
So next time we're going over the class diagram, right?
Yeah.
So on Thursday, we're going to go over the class diagram. And we'll be in I always forget if it's 332 or 334. Check both. No, I'll just email y'all and tell you. So that's it. And I will send y'all the materials that we got from tonight. So you'll have it.
Do you guys get like a general, like
Did
a
it help?
good guideline of how? Okay.
Okay. Yay.